We are ranking all of the position groups in the AFC West today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
Joseph, you know how your timeline like cultivates your content specifically for you, but sometimes you get things that aren't necessarily what you'd expect to be on there, but it ends up being something like really catches your attention anyway.
Yeah, fall into this hole all the time.
Yeah. I am captivated by Stone Cold Steve Austin being a cat dad.
Oh, so this is multiple days now this week where
he's got a cat named Poncho, and he posts videos. I guess apparently every day of Poncho's adventures on Stone. Like Stone Cold's got like a ranch. And you think about Stone Cold, right? And
I'm familiar with him. Yeah, I mean,
had a beer, had another beer. You're supposed to say what after everything I say?
I don't know the stuff. I don't know the jargon.
Just what?
I feel like I'm in a Catholic church service right now where I don't know the chants. I don't know what to say afterwards. I'm lost.
What? That's the Stone Cold, right? So like so seeing this grizzled vet, like old Stone Cold Steve Austin laying in bed, petting his fuzzy cat is just, it's like really wholesome content. And I'm looking at a piece right now as cats like herding other cats on the ranch. And that's where I wanted to start today's show.
From one cat dad to the other.
That's right.
I can't relate. I don't have any cats.
Man, they're great.
Yeah,
who was it? Stone Cold that said this? It was like, I like getting affection from a pet cat because you have to earn it, right? Like dogs are just like, it doesn't matter who you are. They're going to love you no matter what, the unconditional love. And he's like, loving a dog is easy. Loving a cat is hard because like you got to earn it. I'm like, yeah, that like makes sense because my cat, he doesn't like being held. But if I'm just sitting here and he comes, like he'll come up and like jump up on the desk and just kind of sit here and rub his head on my arm. And I'm like, oh, okay. It's on your terms. Great. Good to see you. Like, how's it going?
I don't know, man. If you're going to have an animal in your house, I'd like it to love me unconditionally for the life that I've given it. I don't want to have to earn this at all. You know,
well, you got to go out and dig yours out of the yard.
Well, yeah, Bruno. Yeah, that's right.
Go out and chase him down because he doesn't want to come inside.
Right.
Talked about this week.
Well, I'm not saying that they don't have annoying issues, but like, at least they're pretty much loving all the time, which is the point of the pet. All right, here we go. This is everybody's favorite moment of the week during this series, where we rank.
I think it's good.
Where we rank all the position groups in the AFC West, and so we've done individual podcasts on every single one of these teams, and now we're going to stack them up through the lens of quarterback, offensive skill groups, O-line, D-line, linebackers, and secondary in a project that I'm sure everybody is going to agree with. As always, we kindly ask that you don't share the screenshot if you're watching on YouTube because it lacks the context of the conversation.
It's true.
So don't do that. Don't be that guy. And listen, we've had great cooperation. The first week, what was the division? I can't remember. Was it the NFC East? Whatever division it was, they didn't cooperate. It was the AFC North. That's who it was. AFC North. Yeah. And they didn't cooperate, but everyone else has sense. So at least
if you haven't, we haven't seen it. Which if you're not going to cooperate like a cat, keep it that way. Make sure we don't see it.
Don't tag us. Right. Right. Yeah, it's a good point.
So
shall we?
We're doing the thing. today on the show. If you missed the individual conversations, every team in this division got its own time in the sun. But now it's time for us to go big picture. We will start with quarterbacks. We do quarterbacks, skill players collectively as a whole. So not just your wide receivers, not just your running backs, the collective entire group. Although I feel like this was the most straightforward out of all the divisions that we've done as far as like the skill group, right? You think about some of the teams, the Eagles and where they stacked, and there are the Bengals fans and how offended they got with where we got their skill group.
Yeah.
They only had 2 wide receivers, and like that's really it for proven players. This group didn't feel muddy based off of putting tight ends, running backs, and wide receivers all in the same bucket. We do offensive line, we do defensive line, linebackers, and then secondary. So we're going to start with quarterbacks, and this will probably be the easiest one we slot the entire summer. We're going to put Kansas City at number 1 for their quarterback situation.
Cut and dry. Patrick Mahomes, QB1 in the league, QB1 in the AFC West.
I feel like number 2's very cut and dry as well.
Yeah.
Justin Herbert.
Right.
Obviously, the prolific production that he's had, a lot of their wins in the past several seasons. He's had to do a lot of late game heavy lifting to get that done. Eager to see what he looks like in a different system, and hopefully with a little bit more well-balanced team around him. But his individual talents, this is one of the 3 most physically gifted quarterbacks in the league. I think that's probably fair to say. Maybe 3 is too narrow of a number, but like top 5 most physically gifted quarterbacks in the NFL. Like he's on that list, and the production's been there.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think the thing about Justin Herbert this year is it's by far the worst supporting cast that he's had in terms of weapons, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no Keenan Allen, there's no Mike Williams. Like we're hoping for
Eckler,
Josh Palmer and
even Eckler's regression. I mean, the passing game element, he was like a regular fixture in the passing game.
Dude, we don't even have Gerald Everett, man. Like we
right.
This is the difference.
Come on, you're spoiling the skill group.
Well,
rankings.
I felt like it was necessary to mention with Justin Herbert as we try to calibrate our expectations for him this season.
If we get to the end of the season, I think this is where I would want to ask you the question. I don't think 1 or 2 is going to change. Would you be surprised if either the Broncos or the Raiders was in the 3rd spot at the end of the season?
No, not at all, because we're obviously going to put Bo Nix last because he's never played in the NFL, and Gardner Minshew's Pro Bowl quarterback. But
because people are going to not get the joke, and you say Pro Bowl quarterback.
If you don't get the joke and you're listening to this podcast, I don't know what to tell you, man. Like
he's the new age Fitzpatrick. It's a perfect analogy for what Gardner Minshew is becoming in the NFL. And in another 8 years, when he's played for 19 teams, we'll be like, hey, we called it.
Okay.
He's always going to have a lot of fun moments, but there's some proof of concept there versus Bo Nix. And we both like Bo Nix in the pre-draft process. But right now, it's just like we don't know. And then also the backup quarterback situation being Jarrett Stidham and Zach Wilson is a whole lot of bad either. So like if we felt like it was close with Bo and Gardner Minshew, your backup situation really didn't give you a lot of help.
As 2 people who have had season passes to the Fitz coaster, fact or fiction? Fact or fiction? Gardner Minshew plays for either the Bills or Dolphins at some point in his career.
Fiction.
Yeah, I don't think it happens either.
I don't think that happens.
All right.
Mercifully, after, I mean, I'm just bummed Fitz never got the Patriots and do the whole AFC East sweep.
Right. More bum for that, or more bum from the hip injury in Washington. We were all in on Washington,
and they would because they were 500 that year, right?
I think so. Yeah, they wound up being a pretty decent team. It's like, well, what if they had Fitz? This could have been fun.
Yeah. Alas,
all right, that's the quarterbacks. We're getting into offensive skill, O-line, and more on the other side of it. So be sure to stick with us. Maybe you are a fan of a team in the AFC West, or certainly you're a fan of a team in the NFL where there's a lot of great games on the schedule this year, and I'm sure you want to get to some of them. If you do, well, you got to check out Game Time. Download the Game Time app. It's the fast and easy way to purchase tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. The app is awesome, super easy to navigate. In fact, my wife and I, we just bought some concert tickets on there. Hootie and the Blowfish, Kyle Crabbs. And I'll tell you, the prices on Game Time were astronomically lower than any other ticketing service. And that's That's with the best price guarantee that they give you. It's really true. That's something that I literally just experienced. So check it out. The app's awesome, easy to navigate, seat view images. They send the ticket straight to your phone. And also they give you all-in prices. That's my favorite thing, is like literally, the full price from the beginning of the purchase, no surprise fees coming at the end. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Is that Thursday, September 19th at the Music Pavilion Center?
Yeah, it is. So it's a shame I'm going to miss Patriots and Jets on Thursday Night Football.
I'm a little upset that you just casually dropped that you're going to go see Darius Rucker.
Dolphins fan, Darius Rucker. It'd be like I've seen Darius Rucker 3 times, and this will be the second time I've seen Hootie and the Blowfish. So that's the only problem with the Darius Rucker. I mean, you and him have one common flaw in common. You know what I mean?
Darius, come on the show.
Yo, let's get him.
I'm gonna get him on the show.
Talk Dolphins, like talk a little country music.
Yeah, there'd be a common bond for everybody.
Yeah, let's get him on here.
Although I am a little confused. The synopsis of Hootie from Hootie.com describes him as an American rock band and not a country music.
Well, I would say Hootie and the Blowfish is an American rock band, and Darius Rucker is a country singer.
I don't know. Is it?
You got to compartmentalize, man.
Are you sure?
100% sure. There's no argument. There's no argument to be had here.
I'm not going to argue with you.
Yeah,
You've seen him several times. So,
well, Darius Rucker's like literally like super country. Like his first album, I thought I was listening to George Strait, man. But then Hootie's Hootie. It's a different ball game.
So let's get back to something else that people enjoy arguing about, since we're not going to enjoy arguing what classification Darius versus Hootie goes into for music genres. And we'll do skill groups in the AFC West. And our first place team is Kansas City Chiefs.
I mean, they've got Travis Kelce, and Travis Kelce qualifies for a very special bucket we have reserved for the tier within the tier. Yeah, the elite ones, right? So the best of the best, you get some extra bonus points, and that's the case with Mr. Travis Kelce. Good running back in Isaiah Pacheco. Hollywood Brown elevates the floor of this group. Of course, what we saw from Rashee Rice. They've got some talent. I would say that this isn't like an amazing skill group,
right?
Relative to the league, but relative to this division, it does take the cake.
The next, knowing what we know, if you wound the clocks back and you took Hollywood Brown back off the Chiefs and you put Josh Jacobs back on the Raiders, our second place team, the Raiders would be in first place, right? Like that seismic shift of a cornerstone player leaving on one team and a high floor player coming in for another team is enough. And I think that kind of speaks to like the relative closeness, but we do have Kansas City by a decent margin just because we think they're pretty high floor across the board. And Zamir White, we'll see what he does this year. I think he's got a lot of mobility to play himself up into higher categories based off of where we have him categorized right now. Their hallmark players, of course, Davante Adams, who's getting into the later chapters of his career. I wouldn't say he's a twilight player at this point.
We're still tier within the tier for Adams.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we did the thing. We were like, all right, name your top X receivers in the NFL. And he was kind of one of those guys that came in the last few names, but definitively qualified to be a tier within the tier type of player. So he is a special talent in his own right. But for the Raiders, it's the rest of the group that is a lot of youth at tight end that we don't really know about. Zamir White and a whole bunch of probably non-factors with the veteran guys in the running back room, and then a whole bunch of youth at wide receiver. So they get built up by Davante Adams, but we have more questions with them than we did this time last year because Josh Jacobs was coming off the year that he had the previous year.
I mean, you say questions, but it's just like how good's Trey Tucker going to be? How good's Bowers? How good's Mayer? How good's White? Yeah,
those are questions, right? It's like there's a high range of outcomes, and because it's not defined, like what definitive direction, like how good you're going to be, it's open ended for the Raiders.
Denver at number 3. this is a team that has some of that same type of deal here, where like Marvin Mims, we're thinking he's going to be a major factor here. How good's he going to be? Do we see Javonte Williams kind of like we saw some of that last year, but there's more for him to find in his game. Like what do we get out of tight end? Is Greg Dulcich healthy and the version of him that we want him to be, or is we just going to be kind of mid with Adam Troutman taking those snaps because Dulcich's hamstring is injured? So also Troy Franklin, like what's he going to be for this team? So I think they've got some reasonable floor in Cortland Sutton and Josh Reynolds, but we got to find out more about the ceiling of the rest of this group.
And then that leaves the Chargers with their most accomplished receivers, DJ Chark. Right? We don't know what Quentin Johnston is. Underwhelming first season as a young player. Josh Palmer's kind of been a player who just refuses to go away and might be poised based off his chemistry for another nice little season for them. They also obviously have the second round draft choice in Ladd McConkey, but a lot of unknown, again, like what we just got done outlining with some of these other groups. Tight end, they go out, they get Hayden Hurst and Will Dissly. Will Dissly's a pretty high floor player, but the ceiling is a passing game player. It's up in the air. And then you got J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards as your two primary backs as well. So the pecking order of accomplished players, while it all makes sense for the direction that they're going to go as a team, the confidence meter that we have in how good it's going to be and how quickly, it's just to be determined, right? So the Chargers come in that fourth spot in the skill group based off of a part of their roster overhaul. And we'll see a bounce back from them, but the erraticness of some of the position groups in this division is going to continue as we continue to work our way through other position groups, Joe.
Another category, another one that the Chiefs are number one in its offensive line. And there's questions about their tackles for sure, but there's no questions about that middle three of Tooney, Humphrey, and Trey Smith. I mean, that's arguably the best middle three in the NFL. We got a couple of cornerstones in there, and that elevates what this scoring looks like for the Chiefs. And I think they might have something in Wanya Morris. We got to learn a little bit more there. Suamai Atia, second-round pick. I'm sure there's a lot of hope for what he can bring, so we got more to learn there. But that middle three, man, that's going to put you as a solid offensive line all day long.
Yeah, and you can navigate a lot of pressure off the edge if you have the sturdiness of the interior of the pocket, right?
Yeah, they help. They do such a good job with their tight ends to help the tackles, and Pat's unbelievable right in the pocket with his ability to not allow pressures to turn into sacks. And so, yeah, they know what they're doing, keeping that pressure out of the face, and if they're going to get pressure, let it be off the edge.
Our second team in this division is help me out. I just changed my tab.
It's Denver.
No, it's the Chargers.
Chargers. Sorry. Yeah. We didn't have it sorted correctly. The Chargers.
The LA Chargers with a cornerstone in their own right in Rashawn Slater. Some young players, but players that have enough under their belt with Jamari Salyer and Zion Johnson that we feel pretty good about who they are as far as being high floor. You feel good about them as starting players, even if they're not necessarily like needle-moving impact type players. They make the transition at center with Bradley Bozeman. The scary thing for the Chargers is Joe Alt doesn't get any points because he's a rookie.
Right. Yeah, dude, he can be one of the best in the game right away.
So that can very quickly turn into an even bigger boom for the Chargers as far as, okay, you're looking for where you want to hang your hat. Your perimeter players, you have some question marks in, but you should go into a lot of games offensively and feel like you have a pretty good chance to win line of scrimmage. And they have high floor players across the board with monstrous ceiling players on the edge with both of their tackles.
Denver comes in at number 3, and they're not far behind. I mean, honestly, it's pretty tight with them in the Chargers. And I think that obviously stems from having a rock solid, like high quality starter and Garrett Bowles, the left tackle, Quinn Miners, and what he's become at right guard with other sufficient level starters and Ben Powers and Mike McGlinchey at left guard and right tackle. We got to learn about your center. We don't know what Luke Wattenberg is at this point, replacing Lloyd Cushenberry. And I think another thing with Denver is the depth doesn't really help them, but it's really close. Even despite what I said, they're very close with how they scored compared to the Chargers.
And the Raiders check in fourth, but they are 0.02 of a point behind the Broncos. So like that's almost a coin toss for how those two units score. The Raiders get hurt by having a rookie starter projected in their unit as compared to Denver. Colton Miller, we have graded as a quality starter. We like what we've seen thus far from Dylan Parham and Andre James. So you feel good about the direction of the group. Parham, year 3 player, what kind of jump can he make? Jackson Powers-Johnson, kind of a open-ended, but then also the right tackle spot is, I think, probably fair to say the biggest question mark. It's either Denver at center or Raiders right tackle is the biggest individual question mark for the offensive lines in the division.
Yeah, I'd lean Wattenberg just because he really hasn't played. We've seen Thayer Munford start some games.
Counterpoint, positional value would dictate that the tackle position for the Raiders is more important.
But I've seen more from the player. Anywho, it'll sort itself out. They'll play the games. We'll see what happens.
That's right.
All right.
We'll see what happens, like Joe Marino likes to say.
Am I wrong? All right.
No,
on the defensive side, we are going to get into all of that, D-line, linebackers, and DBs on the other side of it. So be sure to stick with us.
I popped this back out on YouTube just to pop us back in and bring us to the tier maker.
Nice.
So
very good.
We are going to go to the defensive side of the ball and do defensive lines. And a round of applause for the Las Vegas Raiders.
Yeah, the Raiders. They knocked the Chiefs. There we go.
They've taken the first spot. This is what happens when you have a handful of cornerstone players. The Chiefs have not just a tight end, but also a defensive tackle. They have like that tier within the tier elite of the elite player in Chris Jones. Maxx Crosby negates that because we have Maxx Crosby in that tier on the edge. And then we have Christian Wilkins as a cornerstone at defensive tackle and a young player, Malcolm Kuntz, who we've really liked what we've seen from him thus far as turning into a really disruptive presence on the edge. And we have some questions about the depth behind Wilkins on the interior. We got more role players. You got some questions about the depth of the edge players for the Raiders as well, but they are carried by 2 stalwart players that, frankly, if they're healthy, you expect them to not leave the field. And that really helps to elevate the scoring and the ceiling of this unit.
Chiefs at number 2, obviously the hallmark player here, Chris Jones, who's a tier within the tier player. And then what George Karlaftis has become off the edge, the big jump that he took in year 2. That's a really good-looking young player for them. And, so a lot of really good, depth type players and Noddy and Pennell and even Tershawn Wharton and Mike Dana. These are all nice pieces of what they have. We'll see what Felix Uzoma can be. Obviously, Charles Omenihu and his status is going to dictate things. It's probably not likely that he'll be available early in the season, but there's obviously Karlaftis and Jones is really the story here. And that team just plays really well together. I think the sum of their parts is really, really strong.
Mm-hmm. We have the Broncos in third place, and this is largely maybe the deepest group of anybody in the division, of the entire defensive front. They just don't have the needle moving. The Raiders have 2 cornerstones, and the Chiefs have Chris Jones along with George Karlaftis as a quality starter. And you look at what the Broncos have, and it's man, I like 3, 4, 5 of these guys on the edge. I like their interior too, and Zach Allen and DJ Jones. But do they have that elite player that helps them in this scoring methodology that we enroll? And they don't. Now, they're very well represented from a 1 through 7 on the defensive depth chart. They get a lot. They get a fair amount of points from all of those guys, but they just don't have that extra individual player. Now, if one of them emerges this year, whether it's Benito or Browning or Zach Allen takes another leap this year or whoever it may be, then things get interesting. I think they're close enough to Kansas City that it could be compelling based on the depth. But right now, Denver has the bodies They just don't have the peak with how we have it scored.
Yeah, looking at the Chargers coming in last year, it's a likable edge situation with Mack and Bosa and Tuipulotu. Got to say the whole thing. You can't just isolate the last name. That's what I just learned there. Even when they signed Bud Dupree as well, they got tons of edge rushers. But the problem is we just don't have enough on the inside here. Where like, who's your hallmark name? Puna Ford, Otito Ogbanya. We don't know anything about him. Justin Agboigbe's a rookie. So there's just not enough on the inside here to boost up the scoring for them to be any higher than last.
We now have the linebackers. And I have bad news for everybody. The Chiefs are going to go back in first place.
Yeah, because short-lived.
They got a really solid and a deep group of linebackers when you consider the hit that they got in free agency with Drew Tranquill, what they have in Nick Bolton, very different styles of those two respective players. And then they have another Mauler-type linebacker in Leo Chenal who can play on passing downs as a pressure player, and he can deconstruct blocks in the box at a very high level. He started to show that this year. They are just very well-rounded and have a lot of depth on the second level, and that allows them to take first place for linebackers here in the AFC West.
Raiders at number 2, and I think it's a credit to their development and what they've been able to get out of Robert Spillane, who wasn't that good for Pittsburgh, but obviously the best version of himself with Antonio Pierce and the Raiders. And then, of course, what Devon Diablo's become as a safety convert out of Virginia Tech, and it's taken a couple of years, but he's, gotten to the point where we think he's a sufficient level starter. So, I don't love the depth, but that starting pair, and that's what really matters here in the scoring. That's a couple of sufficient level starters that maybe if you would have said 3 years ago these were sufficient level starters for the Raiders, you might have thought we were a little crazy, but that has absolutely worked out.
Yeah, there's no point denying the tape, right? The Broncos come in third here, courtesy of the establishment of Alex Singleton as a linebacker at the NFL level, and it was good for them 2 years ago, had another nice repeat performance. Not a player that is maybe universal and you feel like you can play in all situations and feel like he's going to shine in every regard. But as far as a traditional stack off ball linebacker with some size and length and can play in traffic, there's a floor there that I don't think any of the other players on them or the Raiders the Chargers, who we have as the other team, is able to provide. Now, Junior Colson might have something to say about that this year, but as of right now, there's no proof of concept with Junior Colson. We kind of perceive the rest of both of these linebacker rooms to be like adequate depth or quality depth level players, good special teams type guys. The Broncos get hurt by losing Drew Sanders. That's a bit of a bummer to kind of see what there was the ceiling for him to grow into and surpass what we had Josie Jewell graded as last year, but they'll have to wait another year for that. So we have the Broncos and the Chargers right now. The Chargers have a top 3 of Colson, Perryman, and Neiman. That Colson's going to have to be a dude for them, especially with who he's playing in front of or who he's playing behind on that defensive line.
On to the defensive backfield, and welcome back to the top spot. Kansas City, you are the best group of secondary talent in this division. Obviously, I mean, that's pretty impressive to transition away from L'Jarius Sneed and still have this, but that's what they have in Trent McDuffie and Justin Reid, who are, plus starters for them. And Brian Cook's become a really good starting safety opposite of Justin Reid. And then even their cast of other characters like Josh Williams and Jamari Connor and Jalen Watson, they've flashed, right? And they've played a lot of football here over the last year or so and look like they're more than capable of holding their own. And so Kansas City's been a DB factory, and it doesn't look like that's changing anytime soon.
You know what I want to see? I want to see the Raiders go out and sign a vet corner, because we have the Raiders at 2 in this division. And that's courtesy of Trevon Moehrig at safety, who had his best year of his career this past season. They got a couple of really likable young guys in Nate Hobbs and with Jack Jones. Obviously, Jack Jones, kind of the off-the-field stuff helped spur him away from New England, but the talent's undeniable there. And it's like, man, can he, if he stays focused, he can be really, really good. Jacorian Bennett was a mid-round pick for them last year. We don't really know. That's kind of the other critical spot for them. If they went out and they signed Stephon Gilmore, if they went out and they signed Xavier Howard, right? Like there's a couple of guys that are on the available market who I think could really make the Raiders feel good about having a really competitive defensive group versus the rest of this division and let the chips fall where they may, although they have their own questions on the offensive side of the ball that we've outlined already. But that group for them is a pretty promising one. It's just a question for me of who's going to be your third corner or your other outside corner between Jack Jones and Nate Hobbs. Somebody plays in the nickel. Who can, is Ja'Cory Bennett going to be that guy? And if he is, then great, just let it ride. But based off of what we know right now, we don't really have a lot of incentive to believe that it would be Ja'Cory Bennett.
Chargers at 3, Asante Samuel, Derwin James, Alohi Gilman. That's kind of the trio that's carrying them. Plus, I'm optimistic for Christian Fulton. He's had good tape for 3 seasons. Obviously, last year wasn't his best, but I think he can certainly be a better version of what we've seen. And, there's plenty to learn about JT Woods and Jasir Taylor and Cam Hart, but they do have quite a bit to carry them while some of those younger players do develop.
I just realized the Broncos defensive back score is going to be the Bengals skill group for this division. Right. Because they do have one of the 3 best corners in football in Patrick Surtain the second. Surtain the second. I should know it as a Dolphins guy.
Right, yeah.
They yell at me in my comments whenever he comes up too. So, you're saying it wrong. So I think it's Patrick Surtain the second. But you just look at the rest of that group, right? And we don't really know and have a lot of confidence in a lot of the options for what they are. Is Levi Wallace going to beat out Riley Moss? We don't know what Riley Moss is. Jaquan McMillan, promising flashes last year, but not a big body of work to look at. Brandon Jones, your best safety. And then it's PJ Locke and Caden Stearns coming off I think it was a knee injury last year, like very early in the season, missed effectively the entire year. So you're worried about the depth, but then you're also worried about a couple of different spots in the secondary mid their transition away from Justin Simmons that has the Broncos with, I think, just a few more questions and incomplete evaluations than the rest of the teams here in the West.
So there's the AFC West, man. It's the Chiefs and who can gain ground, right? That's the world we're living in. And Kyle and I know all about it. Bills and Dolphins fans in the Brady era of the AFC East. It's not fun. But
it's a very, very not fun place to be. And I'm glad you mentioned it because I almost brought it up about the third group that we did where the Chiefs were in first place. I'm like, we've lived this firsthand. We know what it's like to you feel like the urgency to be the next team to kind of find their footing and get something that sticks creates a lot of extra pressure, right? It's already high enough pressure to try to chase down the modern dynasty, right? But then it's like, man, we're looking at these other teams and your margin for error for having postseason success is so much slimmer. You feel like a lot of times you're playing for second place. And you hate to say that, but like with where Kansas City's at right now, anything could happen in any given season. And we saw that in the Patriots dynasty in 2008 when Brady went down. Now they still won 11 games. Thankfully they missed the playoffs, but it's so suffocating to coexist in that division amongst that. And it creates, just look at the coaching staffs, right? You had coaching staff turnover with all 3 of these teams in the last 12 months.
Yeah, but Payton and Harbaugh brought into the division. We're trading a first-round pick for Sean Payton. Right. We're getting
Right.
I mean, but
then those processes then lead to, well, now I got to go out and get a bunch of my guys, and now we got to wipe the slate clean. So we got to tear it all the way back down, and then we're going to make a bunch of investments. And then if it's like, well, if it doesn't work, people are going to say, well, look how much time and energy and investment you put into your model to chase it down, and you didn't chase down the Chiefs, so you got to go, and we got to go make another big investment 4 years from now, and that guy's going to do the same exact thing, and you're going to wake up, and 15 years of your life is going to be gone, and you did it 4 times, and you were like 9-7 was the peak. That's exactly we did this. Right. It sucks. And it's like, I really feel for Broncos and Raiders and Chargers fans to know that, like, Pat's 29 this year, the 28, 29, like, you're almost halfway.
Maybe. I feel less bad for Broncos fans. Like, you've seen your team win Super Bowls. You guys are okay.
Yeah,
Chargers fans, to go through like the Rivers thing, and now you got like another good quarterback, and you're like, is this ever going to happen for us?
And the Raiders, obviously, they had like the early 2000s success, but they were the team with Madden in the 70s and 80s that was like they became a dynasty and things like that. And then it's
our age Raiders fans, like, you know, not so much.
Right. It's tough living in the West, and I sympathize with you guys. I don't feel sorry for you guys, but I sympathize with you guys for what you're going through, because I had to live it. So that means somebody else. Misery loves company, right? But that's going to do it for us here on this episode of Locked On NFL Scouting. Hope you guys enjoyed the AFC West. We are finishing this series next week with the NFC South. We will start with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Monday. We hope to see you then.